Okay, Internet, I need a reality check and I need it fast. Has anyone ever accepted a job offer that screamed too good to be true and actually had it turn out, good? I'm asking for a friend, and that friend is me, currently parked in my beat-up Civic at the end of a long, winding gravel driveway that my GPS gave up on 2 miles ago. I'm supposed to be interviewing a reclusive tech billionaire. My gut, however, is telling me I'm about to be the opening scene of a true crime documentary. It started with an email. I'm a freelance journalist, which is a nice way of saying I'm perpetually one late invoice away from eating ramen for a month. I have a little blog, a portfolio site, nothing fancy. But 2 weeks ago, an email lands in my inbox. It's from a Proton Mail address, and it's from someone claiming to be Alastair Finch. The Alastair Finch, the guy who supposedly invented some revolutionary data compression algorithm, cashed out for $1 billion and then vanished from the face of the earth a decade ago. He said he'd been following my work, specifically a long-form piece I wrote on digital privacy, and was ready to grant his first and only interview to me. The fee he offered was life-changing. It was pay off my student loans, buy a car that doesn't make that weird clicking noise, and maybe take a vacation money, all for one afternoon's work. Of course, there were red flags. Communication was strictly through encrypted email. He wouldn't do a preliminary phone call. The location was only sent to me this morning, a set of coordinates dropped into my inbox with the subject line. Today, I know how it sounds, I'm not an idiot, but the desperation was louder than the alarm bells, so I got in my car and I drove. Now I'm here. The house is one of those ultra-modern glass and steel boxes that looks completely alien out here in the middle of the dense Oregon woods. It's cold and imposing, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is the sound. From the property next door, a German Shepherd has been barking nonstop since the moment I pulled in, and it's not a normal get off my lawn bark. This is a frantic, high-pitched, desperate sound. It's the kind of noise that raises the hairs on your arms. It's a sound that feels like a warning, and I'm just sitting here, engine off, keys in my hand, listening to it, wondering if I should just turn around and drive away from that life-changing money. Taking a deep breath that did absolutely nothing to calm my fraying nerves, I finally got out of the car. The dog's barking seemed to intensify, echoing off the severe angles of the house. It felt personal. I walked up the slate-gray path to the front door, which was a massive slab of dark wood with no handle, just a small, glowing fingerprint scanner. Before I could even wonder what to do, it clicked open with a soft, expensive-sounding thunk. Alastair Finch stood in the doorway. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp, symmetrical features and the kind of casual, perfectly tailored linen shirt that probably cost more than my rent. He smiled, a warm, disarming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Eva Richter, I presume," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Alastair Finch. Please come in." I stepped inside and the door swung shut behind me with another heavy, sealing thunk. The barking from outside was instantly muffled, reduced to a dull, rhythmic thudding. The inside of the house was even more unsettling than the outside. It was cavernous, minimalist to the point of being sterile. White walls, a single black leather sofa, a glass coffee table, and nothing else. No photos, no books, no clutter, not a speck of dust. It didn't feel like a home, it felt like a showroom or a very expensive, very private prison. There was a faint, clean smell like ozone or bleach. "Can I get you something, water, coffee?" he asked, gesturing towards the sofa. "Water would be great, thank you," I said, my voice sounding tight. I sat down on the edge of the leather cushion. It was cold to the touch. He returned with a glass of water that was so clear it looked artificial. I set up my audio recorder on the glass table, my hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Finch. My readers are incredibly curious about your work and your reasons for stepping away from the public eye." He sat opposite me, crossing one leg over the other. "Please call me Alastair, and I'm more curious about you, Eva." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Tell me, what was the first lie you ever told?" I blinked. "I'm sorry." "A simple question," he said, his smile unwavering. "Your first conscious act of deception, what was it? Who was it for? Your parents? A teacher? What did it feel like to shape reality with just your words?" This was not how interviews worked. I tried to steer him back, laughing it off nervously. "That's an interesting icebreaker, but perhaps we could start with your time at Omnicore." He completely ignored me. "You grew up in Portsmouth, didn't you? A small, working-class town. Your father was a longshoreman, your mother a part-time librarian. You must have felt so constrained, so desperate to get out." My blood ran cold. None of that was in my professional bio. It wasn't anywhere online, it was just true. The interview, it became clear very quickly, was not about him at all. For the next 20 minutes, he didn't answer a single one of my questions. Instead, he asked his own. He asked about my recurring nightmares, my relationship with my estranged brother, my deepest professional insecurities. He knew things, small, specific things. And with every question he asked, the muffled, frantic barking of the dog outside felt less like a nuisance and more like a desperate commentary on the conversation happening within these sterile walls. He was dissecting me piece by piece with the calm, detached precision of a surgeon, and I had absolutely no idea why. "Excuse me," I managed to say, my throat suddenly dry. "I just need to use the restroom for a moment." Alistair's smile didn't falter, it was like a mask he couldn't take off. "Of course, down the hall, first door on the left." I practically fled from the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hallway was just as stark and empty as the living area. I found the bathroom, stepped inside, and locked the door behind me, leaning against it and squeezing my eyes shut. The silence in here was almost as loud as the dog's barking had been. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers feeling clumsy and numb. I pulled up the original forum post I'd made in the car. "Update, okay guys, I'm inside. This is weird. This is really, really weird. He's not letting me interview him, he's interviewing me. He knows things about me, things he couldn't possibly know. Like stuff from my childhood, the house feels wrong, it's like a museum of nothing. And that dog is still going absolutely insane outside. I can barely hear it from in here, but it's like a drum beat in the back of my head. This doesn't feel like a job, it feels like a test, or a trap." I hit post and watched the replies flood in almost instantly. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read them. "Get out now, dude, this is the start of every horror movie. He's probably got your Wikipedia page memorized and is just cold reading you. Rich guys are weird." No, this is more than weird. The dog is the key. Animals know, they sense things we don't. Listen to the dog, not the man with the money. Leave, seriously, abort mission, call a friend. Tell them the address, do it right now. One comment stood out, sending a fresh wave of ice through my veins. Is he charming, overly so? Does he make you feel like you're the most important person in the world while also making you feel completely worthless? That's how they do it, that's how they get you to stay. I stared at that last comment. It was a perfect description of the last 20 minutes of my life. The flattery in the email, the disarming smile, the intense, invasive focus on me. It was all a performance, a script designed to put me off balance. The chorus of anonymous voices on the internet felt more real and trustworthy than the man sitting a few dozen feet away. They were my lifeline. The dog was the alarm bell and my phone was the dispatcher, and they were all screaming the same thing. I splashed cold water on my face, the shock of it a temporary anchor in a sea of rising panic. "Okay, Eva, you're a professional, you're not a damsel in distress." This was my mantra. I was a journalist who had talked her way past police lines and into corporate boardrooms. I would not be undone by a weird, creepy billionaire. The plan was simple: go back out there, ask two more professional, bulletproof questions, thank him for his time, and get the hell out. My curiosity was officially dead, murdered by a creeping, primal fear. I would collect my fee, or at least try to, and never think about this place again. I walked back into the living room, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster on my face. "Sorry about that," I said, my voice a little too bright. Now, where were we? "I'd really love to get your perspective on the future of data security. With the rise of AI, what do you see as the next great vulnerability?" Alistair was standing by the vast picture window, his back to me, looking out into the darkening woods. He didn't turn around for a long moment. "Data is just recorded memory, Eva," he said, his voice calm and philosophical. "And memory is a funny thing. It can be protected, yes, with firewalls and encryption, but it can also be accessed. The most secure memories aren't stored on a server, they're stored in here." He tapped his temple. "And their only protection is obscurity, the belief that no one else could possibly know." He turned slowly, and the smile he gave me was different now. It was thin, sharp, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the smile of a biologist looking at a specimen under a microscope. "We were talking about your cat," he said. I froze mid-step, my carefully rehearsed plan evaporating. I don't have a cat, I'm allergic." "No, not now," he said, taking a slow, deliberate step towards me. His movements were fluid, predatory. "I mean Pip, the little ginger one you had when you were 8, the one with the torn ear and the milky white blind eye. You used to say it made him look like a tiny pirate." The world tilted on its axis and spun violently. Pip. The name hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't just forgotten him, I had buried him. A flood of sensory details I hadn't accessed in 2 decades rushed back. The rough feel of his ginger fur, the specific, pathetic mule he made because of some kittenhood injury, the way I had to clean the gunk from his one good eye. It was a private, sacred childhood grief. My parents might remember if I prompted them, but the detail about the pirate eye, that was mine. A secret between a little girl and her broken pet. How the word came out as a choked, ragged whisper. How could you know that? His expression was one of cold, clinical triumph. The mask was gone, this was the real him. I know a great many things, Eva, he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush as he took another step. I know you're afraid of being a failure, that you check your article stats a dozen times a day. I know you resent your father for telling you journalism was a hobby, not a career. I know you sometimes lie awake at night, scrolling through the successes of your peers, feeling that bitter, acidic burn of envy. Terrified that you've peaked and your best work is already behind you. He was rummaging through the messy, unlocked drawers of my psyche, pulling out my deepest insecurities and laying them bare on his sterile glass coffee table. I chose you for this interview not because of your talent, but because of your specific, quantifiable desperation. You were the perfect candidate. Candidate for what? The question hung in the sterile air between us, too terrifying to ask aloud. At that exact moment, the muffled barking from outside escalated into a new register. The rhythmic thuds became a frantic, piercing series of shrieks, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. It was as if the dog could hear the shift in the room, could feel the predator shedding its skin and baring its teeth. The sound wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a scream. My carefully constructed professional facade shattered into a million pieces, and all that was left was a terrified animal instinct that screamed one thing. Run, my mind was a blank, a roaring static of white noise and terror. I needed a disruption, a break in his suffocating control, a single moment where the script wasn't his. My eyes darted around the room, a frantic search for a weapon, an exit, anything. They landed on the glass of water still sitting on the coffee table. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was a perfect excuse. My hand shot out, clumsy and jerky, a spasm of pure adrenaline, and knocked it over. The glass tumbled, water splashing in a wide arc across the pristine glass surface and onto the impossibly white, expensive-looking rug below. The sound was shockingly loud in the silent room. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," I gasped, injecting a note of hysterical clumsiness into my voice. "I'm so clumsy, my hands are shaking, I'm just a little overwhelmed, I'm so sorry." It worked. It was a crack in his perfect facade. For the first time, a flicker of genuine, unscripted annoyance crossed Alistair's face. The perfect host persona snapped back into place a second later, but it was frayed at the edges now, like a bad composite image. "It's nothing, don't worry about it," he said, his voice tight with forced nonchalance. "It's just water, I'll get some paper towels from the kitchen, don't move. You might spread the stain." The moment he turned and disappeared down that stark, echoing hallway, my body unfroze. The fight-or-flight instinct screamed at me to bolt for the front door. But some other instinct, the journalist, the puzzle solver, the part of me that had got me into this mess in the first place, took over. I had to know, I had to see what he had been looking at. I dropped to my knees, pretending to be dabbing at the spill with my own sleeve, a frantic, apologetic gesture. But my eyes were locked on the scene outside the floor-to-ceiling window. And that's when I saw it, the thing that made the whole terrifying, surreal situation snap into a new, even more horrifying focus. The German Shepherd was there, a whirlwind of desperate motion. He was a magnificent, powerful animal, all muscle and bristle, but he was chained to a thick metal stake driven deep into the muddy ground. The chain was brutally, cruelly short. It barely gave him enough room to stand or lie down, let alone run. He was throwing himself against the chain's limit, over and over, his powerful legs churning the earth around the stake into a soupy, pathetic circle of mud. But the key, the absolute earth-shattering key, was the direction he was facing. He wasn't barking at Alistair's house. He wasn't looking at me, the strange car, or the weird glass box I was trapped in. His entire body was oriented the other way, a taut line of desperation. His focus was locked with laser-like intensity on a small, dilapidated wooden shed at the far end of his own yard. The shed was an ugly, forgotten thing, its wood grayed and splintering. It had one tiny, grimy window and a heavy-looking, rust-colored padlock on the door. The dog's barks weren't a warning to outsiders. They weren't territorial. They were a desperate, agonized plea directed at that shed or at whatever or whoever was inside it. His eyes, even from this distance, were wide with a terror I recognized because it was a mirror of what I was feeling in my own gut. This wasn't aggression. It was a frantic, helpless attempt to communicate. A cold dread far deeper and more concrete than the psychological horror I'd been experiencing washed over me. It was a physical sensation, a plunge into icy water. The dog wasn't warning me about Alistair. The dog was trying to save someone else. It was trying to alert anyone who would listen. the weird neighbor, the mailman, a lost hiker, a freelance journalist in way over her head, that something was terribly, terribly wrong right there in its own backyard. Alistair, the sterile rented house, the weird neighbor who keeps his dog on a choke chain, it all clicked into place with the sickening finality of a deadbolt sliding home. They weren't strangers. They were a team. This wasn't just a house, it was a stage, a hunting blind. And the dog wasn't the guard, it was the prisoner, a living, breathing alarm system whose warnings were so constant they had become meaningless background noise. Just like whoever was in that shed, and just like me, my interview wasn't the main event, it was just the opening act. That single, terrifying realization was a bucket of ice water to my soul. The time for cleverness, for questions, for journalism was over. This was about survival. I heard a cabinet door close down the hall. He was coming back. I scrambled to my feet, my bag slung over my shoulder, my car keys already clutched in my fist so tightly the metal bit into my palm. I didn't even look at the recorder on the table. It was a casualty, a necessary sacrifice. Alistair re-entered the room, a roll of paper towels in his hand. He stopped short when he saw me standing, poised for flight. The pretense vanished from his face instantly like a light being switched off. The charming host, the eccentric billionaire, it all evaporated, leaving behind something flat, cold, and reptilian. My mom, I blurted out, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. She just texted, "There's an emergency, I have to go, I'm so sorry." "Sit down, Eva," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command, low and menacing. He took a step to block my path to the door. "We haven't finished." "I really have to leave," I insisted, my voice trembling but firm. I sidestepped towards the door. My entire world had shrunk to the space between me and that heavy, handle-less slab of wood. He moved with a speed that was shocking, closing the distance between us. He was taller than me, stronger. The cold, analytical expression was gone, replaced by a flash of raw, predatory anger. The anger of a collector whose prized butterfly was trying to flutter out of the jar. "You are not going anywhere," he snarled. "You are part of the process now." Panic gave me a strength I didn't know I possessed. I didn't scream, I didn't plead, I acted. I feinted to the left, and when he shifted to block me, I lowered my shoulder and shoved him hard in the chest. It wasn't a powerful blow, but it was unexpected. He stumbled backward, his balance thrown off by the slick soles of his expensive shoes on the polished concrete floor. That was all the time I needed. I lunged for the door, fumbling for the hidden electronic latch I'd seen him use. My fingers found the small, recessed button, and I slammed my palm against it. The door clicked open with that same soft thunk, and I burst out into the cool evening air. The dog's barking was deafening now, a frantic, encouraging roar. I sprinted across the gravel driveway, my cheap flats slipping and sliding. Behind me, I heard the door to Alistair's house slam open, but I didn't hear him running after me. As I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, I risked a glance over my shoulder, and my heart stopped. The front door of the neighboring house, the dog's house, was open. A man stood on the porch, silhouetted against the dim interior light. He was stocky, bald, and utterly expressionless, the neighbor. He was just standing there, watching me. Alistair was standing on his own porch, also watching. They weren't chasing me. They didn't need to. They were just two predators, calmly observing their escaped prey, a flicker of annoyance in their eyes, but no real panic. I finally jammed the key in the lock, wrenched the door open, and threw myself inside, slamming the lock down. The engine roared to life on the first try for once in its miserable life. I slammed the car into reverse, gravel spitting from under the tires, and spun the wheel. As I sped away, my last view in the rearview mirror was of Alistair walking calmly across the lawn to join the neighbor. They stood together, two dark figures in the twilight, watching me go, their heads turning in perfect sync. Final update: I'm home, I'm safe. The door is locked, and I have a kitchen knife sitting next to me on the sofa, which is ridiculous, but I don't care. I didn't stop driving until I was 2 towns over. I pulled into a brightly lit gas station, shaking so violently I could barely put the car in park. Then I called 911. I told the dispatcher everything: the email, Alistair, the sterile house, the invasive questions, and most importantly, the dog in the padlock shed. I must have sounded like a lunatic, but I didn't leave out a single detail. They took me seriously, or at least seriously enough. An hour later, a state trooper called me back. The man I met was not Alistair Finch. The real Finch is apparently living on a private island in the Caribbean and hasn't been seen in years. The man I met was an imposter. The house was a short-term luxury rental, paid for with a stolen credit card and a fake ID. The police went out there. They found the place empty just as I'd left it, my audio recorder still sitting on the glass table. At the house next door, they found the dog, dehydrated and frantic, and they cut him free. And then they went to the shed. They had to use bolt cutters on the padlock. Inside, they found the real homeowner, a real estate agent who had been hired to appraise the property for a potential sale. He'd been bound and gagged in there for 2 days. The troopers said they were a two-man crew. They'd done this before. They scouted high-end, isolated properties, lured professionals out under false pretenses, appraisers, geologists, journalists, and held them for ransom. They used the second house as a base of operations. My interview was the final stage of their vetting process, a psychological stress test to see if I was the right kind of target. Isolated, no one expecting me, and desperate enough to walk into a trap. I wasn't their target. The agent was. I was just their next project. I only escaped because I was lucky. I spilled that water. I listened to that dog. The dog, his name is Max. He's with an animal rescue now, getting treatment for anxiety and malnutrition. The trooper said Max had been barking almost non-stop since they'd locked the agent in the shed. He was the only reason the agent was still alive. His constant noise made them nervous about keeping him there much longer. So that's the end of it. The men are gone, the agent is safe, Max is safe. And I'm sitting here, staring at my email inbox, feeling like I'll never trust a stranger again. Sometimes the loudest, most important warning in the world doesn't come from a person. It comes from a good boy who refuses to be silent.